Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Gina Zurlo, and I'm the co-director of the Center for the Study of Global Christianity at Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary. And today I'd like to share with you a short video that was presented at the World Council of Churches General Assembly just a few weeks ago in September 2022 on some of the trends shaping global Christianity. The data that you see in this presentation are largely sourced from two of our major publications, the World Christian Encyclopedia, 3rd edition, and a brand new book that just came out a couple weeks ago, Global Christianity, A Guide to the World's Largest Religion from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, which is an accessible reference book that you can find on Amazon. So let's look at global Christian trends over the last roughly 150 years. This is a line graph of the percent of the world that is Christian from the year 1900 with projections to the year 2050. And this is, in fact, a very boring line graph. This shows you that roughly a third of the world was Christian in the year 1900, and roughly a third of the world is Christian today, and in the future, roughly a third of the world will be Christian. But what this graph doesn't show is that over the course of the 20th century, Christianity had a massive internal transformation. In the year 1900, 82% of all Christians lived in the global north, defined as Europe and North America, and only 18% of Christians lived in the global south, defined as Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania. Now we're going to skip ahead to the year 2020. And you can see that the internal makeup of Christianity has changed dramatically. Now, only 33% of all Christians live in the global north, and 67% of Christians live in the global south. This has tremendous implications for the way that Christianity is conceptualized, the way it's thought about even historically, theological education, mission, you name it. The shift of Christianity to the global south has implications. If you take a longer historical trajectory, that top graph there shows you the percent of global Christianity north and south from the time of Christ with projections to the year 2050. So shifting in global Christian history is not unusual. And we're looking at a majority global South faith today, much like it was a majority global South faith for the first about 1,000 years of Christian history. So here's a map of Christianity today by province. So the darker the blue on this map, the higher concentration of Christians, the lighter the blue, the less concentration of Christians. So you can see here that Europe, North America, Latin America, the Caribbean, Oceania, Sub-Saharan Africa, still very dark blue, meaning higher concentration of Christians. Now, in my analysis, because I'm approaching global Christianity from social scientific perspectives, Christian here is defined as anyone who self-identifies as a Christian. This is the gold standard in social scientific research. So this is not a map of who believes in God, who attends church with any frequency. This is a map of membership or self-identification. So Europe, for example, has very high identification as Christian in most countries, even though most people don't believe in the core tenets of Christianity and don't attend or practice with any kind of frequency. So let's look at Christianity from the perspective of what we call major Christian traditions and movements. There are 2.5 billion Christians in the world today, and they can be considered in 4 major Christian traditions: Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, and Independents. Independents are Christians who do not self-identify as Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants, including many millions of African independent Christians, also post-denominational third wave charismatic Christianity, also Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. And within those 4 traditions, you have 2 movements, evangelicals and Pentecostals charismatics. So you can be, for example, an evangelical Protestant or a Catholic charismatic or a Pentecostal evangelical independent. Here's another way of looking at world Christianity, now through the perspective of these 4 major Christian traditions. You have the pink color, which is Catholic, found throughout much of Western Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, Central America, the Caribbean, many states in the United States. Independent Christianity is the dark purple. China and India stand out as two countries with very large populations of independence because the Chinese house church movement and different kinds of underground movements to Christianity, Muslim background believers, Hindu background believers are considered independent. Orthodox are still mostly concentrated in Eastern Europe, also, of course, the Coptic Orthodox in Egypt and Orthodox in Ethiopia, and then Protestants are found all throughout the world in that green color. So if you look at each of these traditions and movements, we can see the north-south distribution, and with the exception of the Orthodox, all Christian traditions are now majority global South faiths. Catholicism, you can see here, concentrated mostly in Latin America, Western Europe, but also the Philippines there, you can see. And it might be surprising to some that Sub-Saharan Africa has very large populations of Catholics. What I like about the global north-south distribution graphs at the top is you can also see how young some of these Christian traditions are. So if you look at Protestants, only there since the beginning of the 1500s. But Protestantism is found all throughout the world, but it might be surprising to learn that at least 40% of all Protestants live in Africa. Here's the Orthodox trajectory, which again is very different than those of other Christian traditions because of a long history of persecution that has happened among the Orthodox, especially in the 20th century. So Orthodox Christianity is the only one that is a majority global North because of its focus geographically on Eastern Europe. Independent Christianity is also relatively new, and we can see that independent Christianity is a very broad category with many different kinds of Christians in it that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other theologically, but because of their self-identification as outside of traditional Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant Christianity, they do get grouped together in the same overall tradition. So you get lots of diversity in this movement throughout North America, Latin America, Asia, Africa, everywhere. Looking at the movements, we can see that evangelicalism is a majority global South faith, even though the United States is the country with the most evangelicals. But for the most part, the contours of evangelicalism, the debates, the interests of evangelicals in the United States don't really align with the movement in the rest of the world. So if we look at evangelicals and their shift from the north to the south, you can see that 92% of all evangelicals lived in Europe and North America in the year 1900. But today, this is what global evangelicalism looks like. There are more evangelicals in Africa than anywhere else in the world. But I think a lot of people in the West don't really see evangelicalism as an African faith, but it is. Likewise, if we look at Pentecostal charismatic Christianity, which is, I would argue, the newest kind of Christianity, it is also the fastest growing kind of Christianity in the world, far outpacing some of the more traditional mainline historic Protestant churches, even though Pentecostals and charismatics are found within many of those traditions. There was hardly a Pentecostal charismatic movement in the beginning of the 20th century because the revivals were still happening in 1904, 5, 6, 7. So in that time period there, we start to see these revivals happening. And by today, we can see that Pentecostalism is definitely owned by the Global South. One last category in our taxonomy that I want to discuss in this little talk is what we call Christian families. So Christian families is when we piece together what some people call denominations into global families. So for example, Anglicans, Baptists, Lutherans, Reformed Presbyterians, Methodists, Adventists. These are terms that people are pretty familiar with if you think about Christianity. And so here we have families in 1970 and families in 2020. And you can see that Latin Rite Catholics were the largest family and still are the largest family. But this is a helpful way of thinking about Christianity because it shows a lot of the diversity in global Christianity. That yes, Catholics are the largest, but we still have a very substantial Pentecostal charismatic movement. We can also see all the different kinds of Protestant and independent Christianity, hidden believers in Christ, or house church movements. Families help us see global Christianity at a different level. And the last thing I want to show here is the growth or change of Christian families from 1970 to today. So in order for any religious community anywhere to kind of maintain their growth in the world, you need to grow at least 2% per year. That's kind of normal global population growth. And so if you see that second line there is the 2% line. So there are some traditions that are growing much, much, much faster than normal population growth. So that very tall graph there is non-traditional house and cell Christianity. And that's a lot of what we're seeing in the global South. And in places where it's frankly dangerous to be a Christian, we see this kind of Christianity growing. But we can also see Pentecostals, Charismatics, non-denominational, Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, hidden believers in Christ. All of these groups are growing at far above 2% per year. Now, if you look at what's happening below that 2% line, you see the more traditional churches that we might associate with Christianity: Eastern Orthodox, Anglicans, Baptists, United Churches, Reformed Presbyterians, Methodists, Congregational, Christian Brethren, Moravians. All of these groups are not keeping up with general population growth. So you would say technically they are declining. So we have this dynamic in global Christianity where the older, more traditional groups are slowly declining or not keeping up with population growth. And the newer kinds of Christianity that are not part of, say, the ecumenical movement are growing much, much faster. So this is one of the tensions in global Christianity, is how to incorporate these newer Christians, these newer church movements into the global Christian story. So this is just a very quick overview of what's happening in world Christianity, and I highly encourage you to reach out to us, send us an email, ask us questions, find us online, follow us on social media, scan the QR code, get a copy of our latest book, Global Christianity, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you.